tracer fire flying across the city in the direction of the airport. The city at this stage still very well illuminated. The electricity supply is still on in the city, illuminating the city. Detonation coming in from towards the airport. Multiple detonations now going off again towards the perimeter of the city in the direction of the airport. We see one fire on the horizon at this moment. Kabul is surrounded by mountains. The detonations reverberate from those mountains, so it's difficult to get an accurate fix on exactly where the impacts are happening. Certainly, certainly it would appear that the Afghan defense systems have detected a threat in the air. They are launching what appears to be anti-aircraft defense systems at the moment. Certainly I can see that fire that was blazing on the horizon. It was a faint yellow. It's now a bright orange blazing. Several other detonations going off around the city, multiple areas. Rockets appear to be taking off from one end of the airport. I can see that's perhaps located about 8 or 9 miles away from where we stand, Joey.
We want to ask you to please keep your line up to us. We're having difficulty reaching you on another line, but please keep your line up. We can see the pictures coming to us by the video phone. Again, this is very advanced technology that CNN is using, but you will see some of the digital effect. It is not quite as clear as your average television signal, and so to our viewers, we apologize for that. But this is certainly the only video that you're going to get from Kabul, Afghanistan at this point, and you're watching it on CNN. Again, we are hearing from our correspondent, Nick Robertson, who's on the scene in Kabul with his team there, and he has reported the sounds of tracer fire. He has reported the fire burning there in Kabul, the seat of Afghanistan's power and the seat of its Taliban government. Again, we are watching their picture coming to us on the video phone, and it is very hard, of course, to see exactly what you're looking at, but you are looking at Kabul. Again, you see some tracer fire there coming across the scene. Nick Robertson, can you hear us?
We're being told, Joey, I can hear you if you can hear me. Certainly, big detonation there, missiles flying across the city. We're being told from sources in Kandahar, that's the spiritual capital of Afghanistan, 300 miles south of here, that there is no rocket activity like this south of here in Kandahar. Certainly in Kabul, very, very active at this stage. Multiple detonations. It is nighttime here. It is dark. It is difficult to get an accurate fix on exactly what we're seeing and exactly what we're hearing. Certainly the sound, what appears to be the sound of large missiles incoming and landing in the city. Certainly a big fire on the horizon of the city at the moment. And certainly anti-aircraft fire coming up from the city and rockets being launched and flying across the horizon of the city. Rockets perhaps going at the speed of several hundred miles an hour, the sort of speed that one might expect to see cruise missiles traveling across the horizon at, burning with a white glow coming from their tails rather than a yellow glow. The fire on the horizon that we can see from here burning furiously now. Perhaps it would be accurate at this stage to suspect that that was a fuel dump that's been hit by the way that it's burning, flames leaping, and that fuel dump must be perhaps 5 to 8 miles from where I am. Flames leaping up from that fuel dump now leaping up right into the air. It was a low-burning fire before, but it's now really increased in its ferocity, perhaps indicating that it is a fuel dump. Looking across the rest of the city, that fuel dump, perhaps the only big fire we can see at this time. From our vantage point here at the Kabul Intercontinental Hotel that overlooks the whole of the city of Kabul, that is in a basin surrounded by mountains, the whole city is laid out in front of us. The gunfire that was coming up from the city seems to have subsided for now. We're not hearing any more detonations at this moment. And as I say, the fire on the horizon really burning furiously at this time, flames leaping way up in the air this moment. Joey?
Nick, if you can talk to us a little bit about your circumstance. It is 6 o'clock in the evening here in Atlanta. It must be quite late at night there in Kabul.
Indeed, 2:30 in the morning here, Joey. We're eight and a half hours ahead of East Coast time in the United States. And it was about 5 hours ago that the foreign minister of Afghanistan, Wakil Ahmed Mutawakil, briefed journalists. I hear more detonations going off now. He said that the Taliban had not taken precautions against the possibility of there being an air attack against Afghanistan. He said because it was not necessary. The Taliban spiritual leader, Mullah Omar, had also made a statement saying that they felt Osama bin Laden wasn't responsible for what had happened in the United States. He said his country was a peaceful country. He wanted it to be at peace, and he wanted peace in other countries around the world. Certainly what we're seeing in Kabul these early hours of this Wednesday morning is very far from peace. Certainly multiple explosions happening in and around the city. There is a front line about 50 miles north of the city where the Taliban are fighting a battle against the Northern Alliance here. We could hear detonations coming from that northern area as well. But on the perimeter of the city, particularly in the direction of the Kabul airport, which is about 5 to 8 miles from where we are, detonations coming from there. I remember standing on this balcony about 4 years ago watching fighter jets bomb that airport as part of Afghanistan's ongoing civil war. The flash at the airport to us hearing the detonation at the hotel is about the same duration. So I am using that as an estimate to gauge that those missiles again are falling in the area of the airport. First, we're seeing the flash, and then we hear the detonation some several seconds afterwards, and they appear to be coming from that airport area, in some cases several miles away from us. There is still a lot of flashing we can see in the air reflected off clouds. That could be thunder and lightning. However, there's a possibility that those reflections are missiles landing elsewhere. The flashes as they explode and reflecting off the clouds. But it's not a good indication. We certainly don't hear any detonations coming from that particular direction at this time. The anti-aircraft fire that we were seeing a little while ago is not coming up from the city. The city, apart from the detonations we were hearing a few minutes ago, appears very, very calm. The visibility here is excellent. We can see all the way across the city. It lies on a plain that's surrounded by the mountains here in Kabul. We have high mountains to the right. These mountains were used by the Mujahideen as vantage points for shelling the city several years ago during the Mujahideen infighting in Kabul. The last 5 years, the Taliban have been in control of this city, have been trying to extend their control over and across Afghanistan. And the foreign minister this evening telling journalists and CNN that he didn't believe that Afghanistan would be attacked. He said if Afghanistan was attacked, then they would call it, the Taliban would call it an act of state-sponsored terrorism, Joey.
All right, that is CNN's Nick Robertson. Again, please keep the line open to us. Nick Robertson there in Kabul, Afghanistan. For our viewers who are watching this with us on the air, again, we're getting this from video phone technology. You're seeing this exclusively on CNN. It is a very new technology, and so you could tell from the audio line it is not as clear as our typical TV feed, and the visuals obviously are not as clear, but you are looking at the city of Kabul in Afghanistan. This is the seat of the Taliban government there, not its spiritual center, but its government center in any case. You are seeing in just about the last 10 minutes, we have been hearing these reports from CNN correspondent Nick Robertson on the ground in Kabul of an explosion. You see on the right side of your screen about a third of the way over the flames of fire. They were quite large just a short time ago, seem to have simmered down, but again, we're just not seeing very much of this because it's the video phone. Again, Nick Robertson saying that they had seen tracers going up as well. They have been listening and hearing the possibility of additional explosions elsewhere. They're trying to follow that, but it's a little bit hard to tell. Again, it is 2:30 in the morning in Kabul, and Nick Robertson continues to watch there. Now let's turn to Judy Woodruff for us in Washington. Judy.
Joey, we are in the studio in Washington, but of course riveted to these pictures coming out of Kabul, Afghanistan. With me in the studio watching, former United States Defense Secretary William Cohen and Republican Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah. I want to ask both of you about what's going on. Let me begin with you, Secretary Cohen. Is this something that is likely to be the United States retaliating, which is what I think immediately comes to people's minds?
I think we have to be very cautious in coming to that judgment, Judy. What we're looking at now is the United States gathering information and intelligence. Obviously, there are many plans and contingency plans that we have to deal with responding to any potential terrorist threat that might be in the offing again. But I think it's very premature to make any judgment on this. This could be part of the civil war that's been raging on for some time, and so I think we have to wait to get more information.
What do you mean part of a civil war?
Well, there's been a civil war raging in Afghanistan for some time now, and this could be simply the factions still carrying on their fighting in Kabul, rather than any kind of an attack being launched by the United States.
Are you saying, Mr. Cohen, that it's unlikely that the United States would move this quickly? I'm asking that because just a few minutes ago I was interviewing former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, and he said flat out what the United States needs to do is strike against countries like Afghanistan that are harboring terrorists and not wait to find out exactly who was responsible for today's atrocities.
Well, I think we do have to isolate and ostracize those countries like Afghanistan and others who are on the terrorist list who give safe harbor for terrorists. But I think we have to be a little more judicious rather than simply striking out. We have to get more information, and further strikes might be warranted. But at this point, I think we get all the information, then make a very ice-cold decision in terms of what we need to do to protect the American people to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But I think that may be a bit premature at this point.
Senator Hatch, again, we're stressing we have no idea who's behind these attacks in Kabul, the government center of Afghanistan. But if this were the West, if this were the United States, would it be appropriate to retaliate so quickly?
Well, we have some information. You know, about a month ago we had information that they were planning on some big strikes, people who were affiliated or associated with bin Laden. Then just today, we've intercepted some information where some people who are associated with bin Laden basically said that they had hit 2 targets. So it looks to me like there's increasing evidence, even though it's fragmentary and even though it's not positive, that bin Laden is behind all this. And of course, I first warned the nation in 1996 on Meet the Press that we better get hold of bin Laden or he's going to kill Americans.
We're going to bring back our Nick Robertson there on the ground in, or I should say on top of a building there in Kabul. Nick, you're on. Go.
Well, certainly the fire we were watching on the horizon before, I'd made the assumption that it was an oil depot burning because we've certainly seen flames, a dull yellow fire turn into a bright orange fire with flames leaping into the sky. I've been informed by my associates here who work with us in Kabul that it's very likely an ammunition dump that we're looking at. They believe an ammunition dump is located in that area. That, of course, would account for some of the explosions that we've been hearing here as ammunition has detonated and gone off from that location, Judy.
Yeah.
Certainly it's all quiet here in Kabul right now. Certainly no more explosions are being heard around the city. And we certainly believe what we're looking at now is an ammunition dump, the fire at that dump now dying down, and we're hearing no more detonations coming from that dump. Certainly Kabul is within striking range of some of the long-range missiles that the Northern Alliance has and is capable of launching in this direction. And certainly in the past, the Northern Alliance has launched missiles at Kabul. It is not without the realms of possibility that the Northern Alliance could launch missiles at this time. The Northern Alliance in the last couple of days has gone through the rather traumatic process of an assassination attempt on its key leader, Ahmed Shah Massoud. Still unconfirmed whether that leader is alive or dead, and certainly there's a ferocity within the internal fighting going on in Afghanistan at this time. One certainly cannot rule out that any missiles falling on the city tonight could be coming from that Northern Alliance.
So, Nick Robertson, just to clarify, you're saying it could well be part of an a civil war that we see here, and not a result of something coming from the West, NATO, the United States?
From our vantage point this evening, we can certainly report a large number of explosions around the city, what appears to be an ammunition dump on fire, a lot of return fire coming up from positions in Kabul. We cannot say from this position at this time exactly where the missiles are coming from, those causing the detonations in and around the city of Kabul. It is possible it's from the Northern Alliance, and of course there is the other possibility that we've been talking about this evening.
And Nick, is this typical of the kind of fire that you've been seeing back and forth in this war that's been going on in Afghanistan? Is this at all typical?
No, one would definitely have to say it's not typical. The strikes on Kabul have been very infrequent over the last few years, very occasional. The Northern Alliance very aware that it's been blamed in the past of many civilian casualties by launching attacks on Kabul. So there have been very few direct attacks on the city. And indeed, the forces of the Northern Alliance are at such a distance back from the city, only long-range, well, medium-range missiles capable of going 30, 40, 50 miles are able to reach the city from their positions. And it's certainly not something that's happened in this city, a barrage of this type, a sustained artillery attack or missile attack of this type in recent years even.
All right, Nick Robertson, we want you to stay connected to us. Let's keep this connection alive. But as we're watching these pictures, let's now go back to New York and to Aaron Brown. Aaron.
Judy, thank you. I'm joined here as well by Paula Zahn, and you will hear her voice in just a moment. As we continue to look at these pictures out of Afghanistan, again, I would remind you that the technology here is it's called a video phone. It is very high-tech and a little bit imperfect, but it is perfect enough so that you can clearly see that fire burning in the distance. What Nick Robertson has described as an ammunition dump, very probably, and you can very clearly see, or we've been very able to see throughout Nick's reporting, the tracer fire coming up, the anti-aircraft fire coming up.
I think we need to make it clear at this point that no group has claimed responsibility for the multiple attacks today, and yet U.S. intelligence officials confirmed with David Enser earlier today that they believe a group connected to Osama bin Laden may have been involved. You have talked about this all day long, and I think you've done a very good job of explaining how well financed this would had to have been, how well orchestrated. It begs the question, if not Osama bin Laden, then who?
Then who? Nick, from the very beginning, the Taliban officials, Afghani officials have said we had nothing to do with this. Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with this. How do you hear that? Was there any nuance in the language that sent a different message that maybe the rest of us might not have heard? Well, perhaps we have lost at least the audio portion here. Jamie McIntyre has been outside the Pentagon. Jamie, can you hear us?
I do hear you.
Are you hearing anything from the Pentagon, wherever the Pentagon might literally be right now, or at least officials, about whether there is an American involvement in what we are looking at in Afghanistan?
I have talked to several senior officials, and they've told me they are not aware of whether or not this is a U.S. military strike, but the most senior officials are in the Pentagon. And in fact, several busloads of reporters are being taken over now to the Pentagon briefing room, where we expect shortly Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, flanked by the Republican and Democratic leaders of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Carl Levin and Senator John Warner, to brief us on developments today. And if this
this is in fact a military strike or part of a U.S. retaliation, we would expect that Secretary Rumsfeld would tell us at that time. Secretary Rumsfeld has been in the Pentagon all day. He went outside briefly to make an inspection tour of the damage behind me. Many casualties here today, but the Pentagon is refusing to give any numbers or even estimates of how many people were killed and injured in this terrorist attack today here at the Pentagon. But again, no confirmation at this point from any of the officials that I've talked to about whether what we're seeing in Afghanistan is part of a U.S. military retaliation.
Jamie, just to make sure that I've heard this correctly, no one is saying yes it is, but no one has said to you no it's not either, have they?
No, no one has steered us away from it. They've the officials who have been over here with the press, and we're just about half a mile or so from the Pentagon, simply said that they had not been briefed and were not aware of this action when we told them that CNN was reporting explosions in Kabul. So. But again, several officials speculated that if this were the case, that might explain the reason for Secretary Rumsfeld's appearance. And of course, being flanked by the bipartisan support of Congress is clearly designed to send the message that there may be squabbles between the Pentagon and Congress, but when it comes to something like this, there's absolute unanimity. That may also account for the reason that despite the damage to the Pentagon, that they want to hold this event in the Pentagon briefing room, which is on the other side of the building, which was not damaged by the plane crash into the side of the building, in order to show a portrait to the world that the United States military headquarters is still up and functioning, and that the United States is still capable of reaching out and touching its enemies.
All right, thank you very much, Jamie. Right now, we're going to have Senator Orrin Hatch join us to provide some insights as to what might be going on. Senator Hatch, I don't know how much of our coverage you've been listening to, but there seems to be a conflict of opinion as to whether we would be capable of pulling off this kind of attack if indeed that is what we are witnessing. What do you suspect is going on in Afghanistan right now?
Well, let's understand we're capable of pulling it off if that's what it is, but it's probably more likely the followers of Shah Massoud, who was deliberately bombed just yesterday and who was seriously injured, if not killed. Now, his representatives say he was injured, but he's all right, but there is some indication that he may have died in the attack, and he was, of course, the opposition to the Taliban over in Afghanistan, so it's a very serious situation over there as well.
But what about what former Secretary of Defense William Cohen just mentioned, that you would want to know who actually carried off these attacks before you planned any kind of retaliatory strike if this is not a result of some conflict within Afghanistan?
Well, I agree with Secretary Cohen. We have to be very cautious. On the other hand, I thought Secretary Eagleberger was very honest when he said that, look, the Taliban have been harboring Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden has said that it is the duty of every Muslim to kill Americans. There's every indication that he has been behind some of the attacks against American installations, and we happen to know just today that we've got information that indicates that representatives who are affiliated with Osama bin Laden were actually saying over the airwaves that the private airwaves at that they had hit 2 targets. If you go back to the Millennium scare that we had before the year 2000, Osama bin Laden was in the middle of all of that, and the people associated with him and affiliated with him was in the middle of that. So this is a very serious situation. So they should not be harboring this criminal, and we've got to, it seems to me, go after him. And it does look, although the evidence is fragmentary, as though he's had a major role in what's happened here today.
Secretary Cohen, are you as convinced as Senator Hatch is that Osama bin Laden played some role in this tragedy here today?
I think if you were to cast the searchlight of probability on these footprints, they would lead to Osama bin Laden, but I still think that we have to get more evidence. This is not evidence that you would need in the prosecution of a criminal act. I distinguish between terrorism and a criminal act. And so I would think you just need more evidence than we have right now, but it doesn't have to be something you can use in a court of law. I think that the probability is it points to Osama bin Laden himself or the groups that he supports. and therefore I think we ought to keep our focus very much on him, but not exclude others. And so I think a little more time is necessary, but I don't disagree with Secretary Eagleburger that we need to respond swiftly and very strongly to those who have inflicted this great tragedy upon the American people.
Secretary Cohen, it's Aaron Brown. We have heard in a number of conversations that we've had today that the United States needs to be more aggressive or more proactive in its counterterrorism efforts, that you can't wait until something has happened, that you have to stop it before, and it may be that some innocents will suffer because of it. That's a political problem, isn't it?
It is, and the thing we have to keep in mind is we do not want to allow terrorists to strike such terror in the hearts of the American people that we become like them, that we become indifferent to how many innocent people that we might kill. That is what separates us from terrorism and from the terrorists. We have a higher standard. So we have to be very careful in how we respond and how we take action against those who are planning further acts of terrorism against the American people, so that we don't become drawn down into that level of evil that they have perpetrated. So that's what distinguishes the American people and our ideals, and we ought to adhere to those.
And Senator Hatch, you think that the political equation on how the United States deals with this has changed because of what's happened today?
No question about it. We can't take this kind of action without a very heavy response. And we have some information. It may be fragmentary, but the fact is we have some information that indicates that that Osama bin Laden and many of his affiliates and associates, he's certainly the motivating force behind these people. He certainly has the money, and he certainly has the ability to motivate antagonistic forces against the United States, and he said he wants to do that. So it looks very much like that, although we're not absolutely certain at this point.
But Senator, what Secretary Eagleburger said a little while ago, others have said, is not that we, as a country, not that the United States responds all the time, that at some point it needs to take a proactive, it needs to strike before the attack itself, before the terrorist attack. And if some innocents are hurt, if mistakes get made, that is an unfortunate reality. That's a political problem, and I want to know, I guess, from you, if you think the country, which has been reluctant to do that, will be less so because of today.
Well, this is an act of war. As far as I'm concerned, war's been declared against the United States. We ought to act accordingly, and we should have a very stiff response to that. And to be honest with you, it looks to me as though what's happened in New York, just think about it. There must be thousands of people killed here, probably more than at Pearl Harbor by far. And there is evidence, there is indication that there were people who have been affiliated with Osama bin Laden whose communications have been intercepted that basically have said that they got 2 targets. There's a lot of other information that is coming forward, although it's fragmentary and nobody can absolutely be guaranteed in the surety of it, but we all know that Osama bin Laden is doing everything he can to antagonize American forces, to try and hit against Americans. He's called for the death of Americans, and we ought to respond forcibly.
General Wesley Clark was a guest earlier today on CNN, and he began to express what most would interpret as a sense of outrage that we didn't know this was about to happen. There is a feeling that perhaps even during the last administration, too much emphasis was put on technical intelligence and not human intelligence.
Well, you got that right.
Do you buy that analysis?
Well, I surely do. As a matter of fact, we haven't been putting enough money in to the intelligence community, and we certainly haven't been putting enough human on the ground. That means human intelligence on the ground. And we've got to start doing that. And we've got to do a lot of other things. I reported last Sunday with Wolf Blitzer here that it's amazing, with all of the economic difficulties that they have, that the Russians have a better tactical fighter than we do, that it's more maneuverable, it is faster, and our pilots can fly it better than our F-15, which is becoming quite old, and we've been allowing our military to deteriorate. But not only that, our intelligence, we haven't been beefing it up like we should, and we know that terrorism is a reality out there, and especially against the United States, and we also know many of the people who are doing it. And the people who are excited about this over in the Middle East, who are dancing in the streets, who are making fun of the United States, we ought to remember who they are, because they're enemies of our country.
All right, Aaron and I would like to come back to you, Senator Hatch and Secretary Cohen. Right now, though, we're going to go back to Kabul, Afghanistan, where Nick Robertson has an update for us. Nick?
Well, I think if we review what we've been watching here in the last half an hour or so, we heard, first of all, aircraft coming in, then detonations around the city, then the fire, and more detonations coming from what was, we're told, is an ammunition dump. We'll also fold into that the information we've been given here that 300 miles south of here in the spiritual heartland of the Taliban, their city of Kandahar, where their leader Mullah Omar lives, no reports of any detonations there. That city well beyond the range of the Northern Alliance forces. Certainly, the Northern Alliance forces, their commander, their key and pivotal commander, enemy number one of the Taliban, in fact, Ahmed Shah Massoud, attacked in a suicide attack on Sunday. Certainly, the Northern Alliance in a position right now to be feeling very, very aggrieved with the Taliban, and certainly very much in a mood for taking the battle to them on their terms. So looking across the city of Kabul now, it is very quiet. Just dogs barking, the fire from the ammunition dump continuing to burn on the horizon. But evaluating everything we've seen here this evening, what we could have heard was some of Massoud's Northern Alliance jets flying in here. This is something that they do very occasionally. Certainly the Northern Alliance very aggrieved at this stage. And then detonations and anti-aircraft fire coming up at the same time. Again, from our vantage point here over the city, very difficult to tell those details, to tell whose aircraft they were, how many detonations there were, whether they were all missiles from aircraft. Details like that, very difficult to tell at night. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning here. We expect to get a clearer idea, perhaps as daylight comes upon the city in 3 or 4 hours. The Northern Alliance holds about 5% of the territory of Afghanistan. They've been holding out against the Taliban now for the last 5 years, since the Taliban took control of this city, Kabul, in September 1996. Ahmed Shah Massoud, a key pivotal commander, he earned his military stripes, if you will, and earned the respect of many commanders in Afghanistan during the 1980 Soviet occupation. For 10 years, he held out and was undefeated against the Soviet Union forces here in Afghanistan during the 1980s. He was a pivotal commander, the defense minister of a power-sharing government here in the early 1990s, driven out by the Taliban in 1996, has been fighting from the northeast of Afghanistan on an ever decreasingly small patch of land, and the assassination attempt on him at the weekend blamed by Massoud's forces. Yeah.
I need to interrupt you for just a second. CNN's Wolf Blitzer in Washington has been doing some reporting on the president's activities. Wolf, join us.
Thank you, Aaron. We've now been told by Ari Fleischer, the White House press secretary, telling the pool of reporters always accompanying the president on his way back to Washington, that the explosions that we heard in Kabul, Afghanistan, were not part of a U.S. retaliatory strike. Once again, repeating, the explosions that Nick Robertson has just been reporting about in Kabul, not part of any U.S. military strike, clearly indicating this is part of the continuing civil war that's been underway in Afghanistan now for some time. The president is on his way back to Andrews Air Force Base right outside of Washington. We're told that Air Force One is expected to land in about 15 minutes. We're also told it's being flanked by 3 U.S. Air Force fighter jets, 2 F-15s, 1 F-16, a remarkable situation, a remarkable development. All of my years covering the White House, I don't remember ever Air Force One returning to Andrews Air Force Base with protective cover by fighter jets. The president, as you know, is expected to address the nation around 9 p.m. this evening. But before the president speaks, there are 2 briefings that we're standing by awaiting. First of all, the Attorney General John Ashcroft will be briefing at the White House, and the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld will be briefing at the Pentagon. Of course, we will be bringing you all of those briefings live here on CNN. So just once again, to recap, the White House, through the press secretary, Ari Fleischer, insisting that those explosions in Kabul, Afghanistan, not the result of U.S. military action. Paula and Aaron in New York.
Well, thank you. It is a reminder to us here, to all of you as well, that we need to be careful about what we assume as we go on here. There are a lot of reasons why things happen. It's not always the first thing you think about. There are certain things we know that have happened, and we know that just after 8:45 this morning, 8:48, the first of the planes hit the Trade Center. It was shortly after that, 9:08 if memory serves me, and it's been a while now, that the second plane hit. We have seen this now from a couple of different views, and we have found one more to show you of the second hit of the Trade Center. People out with video cameras this morning, and if we can roll the tape and maybe take a look at it a couple of times as we orient ourselves, we're seeing it for the first time as well. There's the plane, you can't miss that.
Holy shit!
Well, it's hard to quarrel with the expletive. You know, we have seen this now. We have seen this, honestly, dozens of times, and it's no less powerful and no less sickening to see it again. Again, let's just look at this scene. This is amateur video, the plane coming, and now no words, no reason.
I think we all have struggled today with a way to define just the impact of what was witnessed here in New York. As you know, Aaron, this is 30 blocks away. As you know, the city is in a state of paralysis at the moment, although I am told that some of the bridges now are beginning to be opened up for outbound traffic. But at a point in the city today when people were trying to be evacuated from the south end of New York City, it was extremely difficult. You were up here and I was down on the street watching tens of thousands of people making their way on foot to get out of the city. Now, one of the things that we've witnessed within the last hour was the collapse of Tower number 7, which is part of the World Trade Center complex as well. As you know, Aaron, because you've been reporting this all day, this has been on fire most of the day. This was expected to happen.
47 stories, not nearly as big as the two towers which once stood behind us, but no small building with 47 stories.
Now, from what we're hearing on the street, rescue workers are still having a very difficult time getting into the perimeter area surrounding this site because of falling debris. City officials still cannot confirm for us at this point how many people have been injured, how many people have been killed. Just before I got on the air, I spoke with someone from the department that deals with rescue operations for the city. This is all speculation on his part, but he has reasonably good information from area hospitals. He suspects those numbers could rise into the thousands. So, Aaron, we're going to leave you right now, and we're going to check back in with Bill Hemmer, who joins us now from Atlanta with another part of the story. Bill?
Paula, Aaron, thank you. I'm Bill Hemmer, live in Atlanta, continuing CNN's coverage of America under attack. Some 9 hours now after terrorists hijacked airliners and crashed them into U.S. buildings. Some kind of attack, as we mentioned, was taking place in Afghanistan, but Wolf Blitzer was reporting there. As we see the videotape by way of video phone in Kabul, Afghanistan's capital, Ari Fleischer with the White House indicates this is not a retaliatory strike. However, this appears to be the ongoing civil war battle that's taking place in Afghanistan. Also, reporters traveling with President Bush have also been told these explosions, again, not part of that U.S. strike at any country at this time. Earlier, U.S. intelligence officials had told CNN there are good indications that persons linked to fugitive terrorist Osama bin Laden may be responsible for a number of terrorist attacks in the U.S. today. Bin Laden is suspected to be hiding out in Afghanistan, and earlier in Kabul, Afghanistan's foreign minister said his country does not allow Osama bin Laden to use Afghan territory to launch any attack on any government around the world. Now, the explosions again in Afghanistan come as we still await the first official estimates of the casualties on what has been a deadly day of terrorist attacks here in the U.S. Both towers of New York's World Trade Center and a section of the Pentagon were destroyed when hijacked airliners were deliberately crashed into buildings there. Rescue officials predict that hundreds, if not thousands, have died in today's attacks. One tower, the World Trade Center, was hit at 8:48 a.m. East Coast time this morning. Officials believe it was hit by an American Airlines Boeing 767 flying from Boston to L.A. The hijacked plane, Flight 11, had 81 passengers, 9 crew members, and 2 pilots on board. About 18 minutes later, as emergency crews were rushing to the scene, a second airliner flew into the other tower, the World Trade Center. Officials believe this hijacked plane was United Airlines Flight 175, again from Boston to L.A., with 56 passengers on board, 2 pilots, and 7 crew members. About 10 a.m. Eastern Time, the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. By then, authorities had closed down the tunnels and bridges leading into the island of Manhattan, and the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, had ordered all U.S. airports closed. The North Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed at 10:29 a.m. New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, while not speculating on the final death toll, has told reporters it may be, quote, more than any of us can bear, end quote. Rescue crews still on the scene. A smaller building, part of the World Trade Center complex, collapsed this afternoon. That's building number 7, part of a larger complex connected to the World Trade Center. The National Guard mobilizing all troops in the New York City area, but New York's tragedy only part of that story. As we look at other parts of the country now, and specifically in Washington, D.C., I'm told Wolf Blitzer now with more information from our nation's capital. Wolf, what do you have for us now?
Bill, right now we're told that Air Force One has landed at nearby Andrews Air Force Base just outside of Washington in Maryland. The President's Air Force One being escorted in by 3 fighter jets, 2 F-15s, 1 F-16. Close by, very often there are some Air Force jets who go up to bring down, to help escort Air Force One down. But this time these planes, we're told, the fighter jets were much closer to Air Force One. The President will be returning to the White House to address the nation later this evening around 9 p.m. Eastern. But in advance of that, several briefings were standing by. We're waiting for a congressional briefing that will occur, the congressional leadership, around 7:30 p.m. Eastern. There will be a briefing from the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, over at the White House. We're also standing by awaiting a briefing from the Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld. Meanwhile, let's take a look back at some of the sights and sounds of this remarkable day of terror.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help, because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Yeah. Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you.
The Pentagon briefing is now underway. Here's the Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld. Unfortunately, we're having some audio problems from the Defense Secretary. We're going to try to fix that. In the meantime, Orrin Hatch is standing by. Senator Hatch, you're a member of the Intelligence Committee. You're not surprised that the bombings that we heard about, the explosions in Kabul, were not the result of U.S. military action?
No, I'm not surprised, because just yesterday, and it looks like it's tied together, Osama bin Laden forces attacked Shah Massoud, who is their enemy in the north, and who is also one of the 12 tribal leaders.
Senator, I think we've fixed the audio with Secretary Rumsfeld at the Pentagon. He's briefing reporters. Let's listen.
Offering their sympathy and indeed their assistance in various ways. I'm very pleased to be joined here by Chairman Carl Levin and Senator John Warner. Senator Warner called earlier today and offered his support and was kind enough to come down and has been with us. We've very recently had a discussion with the President of the United States. Chairman Hugh Shelton has just landed from Europe. Secretary of the Army Tom White, who has a responsibility for incidents like this as executive agent for the Department of Defense, is also joining me. It's an indication that the United States government is functioning in the face of this terrible act against our country. I should add that the briefing here is taking place in the Pentagon. The Pentagon's functioning. It'll be in business tomorrow. I know the interest in casualty figures, and all I can say is it's not possible to have solid casualty figures at this time. And the various components are doing roster checks, and we'll have information at some point in the future, and as quickly as it's possible to have it, it will certainly be made available to each of you. I'll be happy to take a few questions after asking First General Shelton if he would like to say anything, and then we will allow the others to make a remark or two.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Secretary just said, today we have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people, acts that have killed and maimed many innocent and decent citizens of our country. I extend my condolences to the entire Department of Defense families, military and civilian, and to the families of all those throughout our nation who lost loved ones. I think this is indeed a reminder of the tragedy and the tragic dangers that we face day in and day out, both here at home as well as abroad. I would tell you up front, I have no intentions of discussing today what comes next, but make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
Chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin.
Our intense focus on recovery and helping the injured and the families of those who were killed is matched only by our determination to prevent more attacks and matched only by our unity to track down, root out, and relentlessly pursue terrorists, states that support them, and harbor them. They are the common enemy of the civilized world. Our institutions are strong, and our unity is palpable.
Senator John Warner.
Thank you. As a past chairman preceding Carl Levin, I can assure you that the Congress stands behind our president, and the president speaks with one voice for this entire nation. This is indeed the most tragic hour in America's history, and yet I think it can be its finest hour, as our president and those with him, most notably our Secretary of Defense, our chairman, and the men and women of the armed forces all over this world stand ready not only to defend this nation and our allies against further attack, but to take such actions as are directed in the future in retaliation for this terrorist act, a series of terrorist acts unprecedented in world history. We call upon the entire world to step up and help, because terrorism is a common enemy to all, and we're in this together. The United States has borne the brunt, but who can be next? Step forward and let us hold accountable and punish those that have perpetrated this attack. Again, I commend the Secretary, the Chairman, and how proud we are. We spoke with our President here moments ago, He's got a firm grip on this situation, and the Secretary and the General have a firm grip on our armed forces and in communication of the world over.
Thank you very much. We'll take a few questions and then we'll adjourn. Charlie.
Mr. Secretary, did you have any inkling at all, in any way, that something of this nature and something of this scope might be planned?
Charlie, we don't discuss intelligence matters.
I see. And how would you respond if you find out who did this?
Obviously, the President of the United States has spoken on that subject, and those are issues that he will address in good time.
Mr.
Yes.
Secretary, we are getting reports from CNN and others that there are bombs exploding in Kabul, Afghanistan. Are we at the moment striking back, and if so, is the target Osama bin Laden and his organization?
I've seen those reports. They, in no way is the United States government connected to those explosions.
What about Osama bin Laden? Do you suspect him as the prime suspect in this?
It's not the time for discussions like that.
Mr. Secretary, you said you could not be specific about casualties. Can you give us some characterization of whether it's dozens or hundreds in the building?
Well, we know there were large number, many dozens, in the aircraft that flew at full power, steering directly into between, I think, the first and second floor of the opposite the helipad. You've seen it. There cannot be any survivors. It just would be beyond comprehension. There are a number of people that they've not identified by name, but identified as being dead, and there are a number of casualties. But the FBI has secured the site, and the information takes time to come. People have been lifted out and taken away in ambulances, and the numbers will be calculated, and it will not be a few.
Mr. Secretary, could you tell us what you saw? Mr. Secretary, do you consider what happened today
We're looking also at a picture while we listen to the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld of helicopters that we believe are returning to the White House from Andrews Air Force Base. Marine One is the helicopter that has the President on board and lands on the south lawn of the White House, which is the routine procedure when the President returns to the White House from Andrews Air Force Base. These are helicopters that we're now seeing approaching the south lawn of the White House. That's a picture of downtown Washington that you're seeing right now. President Bush just landing only a few minutes ago at Andrews Air Force Base, returning to the White House, getting ready to address the nation around 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. Once again, Marine Corps helicopters that we believe are one of them carrying the President and his party returning to the south lawn of the White House. There are 6 helicopters there altogether, 6 Marine Corps helicopters.
The people who work in this building do so voluntarily. They're brave people, and they do their jobs well.
Mr. Secretary, can you give a sense of what happened? What did you see when you left your office, ran down to the site, and apparently helped people on stretchers and then returned to the command center?
I felt the shock of the airplane hitting the building, went through the building and then out into the area, and they were bringing bodies out that had been injured, most of which were alive and moving, but seriously injured. And a lot of volunteers were doing a terrific job helping to bring them out of the buildings and get them into stretchers and into ambulances and into airlifts.
Mr. Secretary, can you tell us how many of the dead were soldiers and how many were civilians? Have you been able to determine that?
Absolutely not.
Yes. Mr. Secretary, today we saw military planes both in New York and in Washington. How much more of a military presence will we see now that this incident has occurred for the next week?
Those kinds of decisions are made day to day. It is correct that we had aircraft flying protective missions at various places in the United States today, and they will do that as appropriate.
Mr. Secretary, what do you say to the American people who may have questions on how something so coordinated has been carried out against this nation? What do you say to them who might not have confidence that our intelligence and our security are what they should be?
I say to them that the President of the United States will be making some remarks to them this evening that will address those subjects.
Mr. Secretary, you've declared, the Pentagon has declared ThreatCon Delta forces around the world. Could you tell me why? Have you received any threats, or has anyone claimed credit for this?
We have, in fact, declared Force Protection Condition Delta and a condition of high alert, indeed the highest alert. We did so almost immediately upon the attacks, and it is still in force.
Mr. Secretary, were there threats issued against other U.S. facilities elsewhere in the world today?
I don't know that there's a day that's gone by since I've been in this job that there haven't been threats somewhere in the world to some facility somewhere. It's one of the complexities of the intelligence business that you have to sort through those kinds of things. But we don't get into the specifics. Yes. You raise your hand there? Yes.
So, Mr. Secretary, rumors earlier in the day...
Let me interrupt the Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld, to report that this is, we believe, Marine One, the President's helicopter, now landing on the south lawn of the White House, which is the usual procedure, bringing President Bush back to the White House from Andrews Air Force Base. The President began this day in Sarasota, Florida, where he was going to be promoting his agenda on education, then flew to Louisiana, then flew to Nebraska, and finally, when the Secret Service and U.S. law enforcement thought it was safe, now bringing him back to the White House, where later this evening he will be addressing the nation. Air Force One about to touch down on the south lawn of the White House. John King, our senior White House correspondent, is standing by. John, what do you have over there?
Wolf, as you watch Marine One land here on the South Lawn, we have just been allowed back into the White House. We were evacuated as well earlier today. First, let me read you a statement from the President. This during his travels back to Washington. The President telling his National Security Council, quote, "We will find these people and they will suffer the consequences of taking on this nation. We will do what it takes. No one is going to diminish the spirit of this country." Now, the President will return to the White House. One of our cameramen, Mike Bannigan, also just a short time ago shot pictures of Laura Bush coming back to the White House in her motorcade. We do not know where she was, being kept in a secure location at this time, but the First Lady is also back in the White House. Also, after Secretary Rumsfeld finishes his briefing at the Pentagon, a number of Bush administration cabinet officials will brief here at the White House to bring us up to date on the activities of their agencies. One, we're told, the Health and Human Service Secretary Tommy Thompson, who is involved, of course, in the medical help, blood banking and others, so he will bring us up to date on his agency. Attorney General John Ashcroft also on his way to the White House as well, we are told. All of this leading up, all these briefings from administration cabinet members leading up to a nationally televised address from the President tonight to the American people from the Oval Office. You see there Marine One sitting on the south lawn of the White House, a virtual ghost town throughout much of the day as it was evacuated. The President now back in Washington and at the White House. Wolf.
John, the trips to Louisiana and Nebraska that the President took today, that was designed, we're told, and we see a Marine officer walking off Marine One as the President, we expect to emerge from Marine One any second now. We assume that was because security personnel thought it was too dangerous for the President to come right back to Washington. Is that right?
The first stop at Barksdale in Louisiana was designed so the President could get to a command and control center that is fortified and structured so that he could be in contact. You see the President there emerging from Marine One, saluting his Marine escort on the south lawn of the White House. The direction he turned, it appears he is heading straight into the Oval Office. Had he gone straight, that is the path into the White House residence. The President turning left, indicating he will go straight into his office, the Oval Office. The President saying nothing as he walks by there. The first stop was to get him to a command and control facility so that he could have secure conversations with the Vice President, who is here at the White House, and with the National Security Council. At that point, we had been led to believe by some sources the President would come directly back to Washington. Then they took him to the headquarters of the Strategic Air Command for another briefing with the National Security Council amid some concerns that they wanted to run a few more security checks before bringing the President back to Washington. Obviously, one of the heinous acts we saw today on the Pentagon just a few miles away, so an enormous amount of security concerns. Even as we speak here on the grounds of the White House, you see the President here heading up into the path, being greeted by more agents and his senior staff into the Oval Office. Wolf.
And as he goes into the Oval Office in the West Wing of the White House, once again, John, for some of our viewers who may just be tuning in right now, read to us the statement that the president has just released?
This is a statement from the president. This is a statement, we are told by pool reporters, that he gave to his National Security Council, quoting the president, quote, "We will find these people and they will suffer the consequences of taking on this nation. We will do what it takes. No one is going to diminish the spirit of this country." We expect a statement very much like that to be included in the nationally televised address the president delivers to the American people tonight. He is meeting right now in the Oval Office with senior advisors to be brought up to date on the latest casualty figures, the latest information the federal government has on just what took place. The administration has also taken one of the steps, Wolf, that seems routine in some ways. Again, a reminder of the tragedy of this day, though issuing a statement just a short time ago declaring the state of New York a major disaster area. Wolf.
And John, security, I take it, at the White House is extraordinary right now under normal circumstances. You don't see the security personnel that we're obviously seeing right now. Is that right?
That is correct. More security on the grounds, more security out in public, uniformed Secret Service, snipers on the buildings all around the compound here. Remember, this compound, the president was not here at the time, but the vice president was.